Lay on your back and feel the way that your body relaxes onto the floor. And notice the areas that are settling the heaviest. Maybe the back of the pelvis, maybe part of the spine, maybe the head. And then start to sense the parts of your body that don't touch the floor. So certainly the back of the neck is a good starting point. But also, what about the smaller areas? So maybe part of the low back doesn't touch the floor. Maybe behind the knees or the ankles. Sometimes around the wrists. And then from here, start to sense the parts of your body that are touching the floor, but they're not giving their weight fully. And then start to partition your awareness into sections. So the first section, the first line, is the line of the spine, going from the tail to the very top of the neck, where your neck connects to your head. And then the second line starts at the back of your pelvis on the right side and goes from there down the length of your right leg. So feel from the back of the right side of your pelvis to your right heel and compare that to the back of the left side of the pelvis and the left heel. And notice if one of your legs makes more fuller contact with the floor. Notice if where the heels touch is different so that you can sense if one foot turns out more than the other. And now bring your attention to your right shoulder blade and sense how that area is making contact with the floor. The part of your shoulder that's the heaviest, maybe more at the outer edge, more the inner edge, the top, the bottom. And from the back of the shoulder blade, feel the length of your right arm and the contact points of your right arm. And then do the same with the left. And from here, you might start to sense that overall, there's a bit of a tilting of the weight distribution in your body, or sometimes it's more of a diagonal weight distribution. See if you can sense, I love this image of if you were lying on an ink pad and then you were going to cover your back body in ink and then make an impression of that on a white piece of paper. Can you sense or imagine what that would look like? Now feel the weight of your skull, and you'll notice that there's a particular part of your skull that gives its weight the heaviest. And keep the skull heavy And very gently turn your head a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. And it's almost as though you were drawing a line on the back of your skull. And as you do this, sense where you feel the effort required. So when you do this, is it in your neck? Is it in the side of your shoulder, your chest? And overall, the quality of the movement. How big is the range comfortably? Is it easier to turn one way or the other way? And then leave that. And then finally, again, sense how you're breathing. And notice how much movement is around the front of the chest, around the breastbone. And then compare that with how much movement you feel in your belly. And then sense how much you feel your breathing move in the sides of your chest. And overall, does it feel like you receive more breath through one of your nostrils or more expansion in one side of your trunk? And then lift your right arm up toward the ceiling and hang your wrist and your fingers forward. And have the arms straight, but not so straight that it's using any effort, muscular effort to keep it straight. So it can be softly bent. But most important is that you're reaching in the direction of the ceiling and the wrist and the hand is just hanging. And then a few times, do a movement of lengthening the arm toward the ceiling and bring it back down. Just lengthening toward the ceiling and then back where you started. Not down by your side. I just mean just up so the right shoulder blade lifts toward the ceiling like you just did, and then right back to where you were. Exactly. All right. And then compare that. Bring the right arm down and do the same thing in the left. And then bring that arm down and decide which side was easier. Does the movement feel more easy? And if it is pretty similar on both sides, then just pick. So whichever arm was easier, bring that arm back up again. And again, check that the wrist is limp and the fingers are limp, right? So essentially, you want to feel that there's no muscular action in the arm. Now, what you can notice is that the placement of the arm is important. If you adjust the angle slightly of your arm, you'll discover there's kind of a sweet spot where your arm will set into the socket as opposed to it needing effort to keep it up. So make some minor adjustments and try to find the place that your arm can feel the most effortless. And then keep it there and resume the action of reaching your arm toward the ceiling. And can you now start to do that only from the shoulder blade? So the neck stays quiet and the face and the head and the mouth. And you really feel The action starts with the outer shoulder blade, and then maybe it goes inward, maybe it doesn't. And as you continue doing this movement, what do you start to feel on the other side? So as you lift the shoulder blade, let's say it's the left shoulder blade, as you lift the left shoulder blade, what can you sense happening on the right side, the right shoulder blade, the right ribs? And what do you sense about your breathing? Have you made a decision about inhaling or exhaling when you lift, or are you just breathing in and out regularly? And a couple times, try lifting the arm with an inhale, and then compare that movement to lifting the arm with an exhale. See if there's actually a difference in the quality of the movement. And then bring your arm down and take a rest. Feel that shoulder blade that you were just working with and compare it to the other one. And some of you might actually already feel like something is starting to change. Now take that same arm, your easy arm, lift it up again, wrist hanging, fingers hanging, arm is as straight as can be comfortably. And now you're going to do the opposite action. So instead of lifting the shoulder blade, you're going to press the shoulder blade into the floor and then release. And press and release. And again, focus on reducing the effort. Action with the minimal amount of effort. And then get curious about the part of your shoulder blade that's pressing. If it's more the inner edge or the outer edge, what part of your shoulder blade does it seem like you're using? And then start to explore a little bit. So try to press different parts of the shoulder blade down. And of course, this is a gray area for a lot of us. Some areas it's hard to tell, not quite sure which is the bone, which is the muscle. So, it's kind of a cross between sensing and imagining. But basically, the shoulder blade is a rounded triangle, right? So you could try to look for the bottom point and the outer edge. Usually the inner edge, the part of the shoulder blade closest to the spine, is the hardest to sense. And then a few times, press the shoulder blade half as much as you're doing now. So to me, I might not even be able to tell that you're doing a thing. Right? And notice what you feel on the side of your neck where you have your arm raised. And then bring the arm down and pause. And then compare, do the first movement again of lifting that shoulder blade a few times and see if after these two variations, if there's any change. And maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Not necessarily that the movement's bigger or stronger, but there could be a difference in the quality of the movement. Okay. Now, pause, leave the arm up in the comfortable place for it to be set. And this time, do the pressing movement again, but start to do the presses smaller and more particular. So you can imagine, you know, a connect the dots game, where you have the dots in a shape and you draw a line between the dots that children play. So it's like that, where start to map out the shape of your shoulder blade by little presses. And keep checking if there's ways that you could be reducing the effort. Check that the face stays relaxed and that the breath feels easy. And as you trace the shape of your shoulder blade, you might begin to notice that if you shift the angle of your arm slightly, it might make it easier to detect that outer perimeter of the arm. And then if you have your circle, your kind of circular triangle, your perimeter shape going in one direction, change the direction and try doing it in the other direction. And then bring the arm down and take a rest. I like to call the sensation falling, because for me it isn't immediate. When I stop doing an action and I feel what I'm doing, it's not immediate. It's not glaring. Oftentimes for me it's a sense like falling as the area I've been working with starts to settle. So even now that a few moments have passed, you might be able to sense more of a difference between the left and the right shoulder blade. And take a few little bit bigger breaths and sense if there's any shift in the feeling of the right and the left side of the chest and front of the chest and sides of the chest as you breathe, if there's a difference in the right and the left side. And then feel the weight of your skull and roll your head gently again to the left and to the right. And notice if there's any changes in the quality of this movement. And then leave that. And bring your arm back up again. So first, a couple times, go back to lifting and lowering the shoulder blade and sense how that is coming along. And now you're going to start to incorporate the movement of the head. So as you lift the shoulder blade, feel the weight of your skull and start to roll your skull away from your lifted arm. And then bring the head back to the middle and bring the shoulder blade back down. Continue like that. And does it make it easier to lift the arm toward the ceiling when you're rolling the head? And what do you feel lower down? What do you feel in your back ribs as you're lifting the arm and rolling the head? Can you sense where the weight starts to shift? And how far down the back of the rib cage can you actually sense this movement? And once you sense the shifting of your weight, can you keep your attention there? To the receiving on the opposite side of the movement. And then just to compare, a few times let your skull roll in the direction of your arm. Feel the difference. And then bring your arm down. Pause. Now this time, keep your arm down, but bend the knee on the same side and stand that foot up. So the foot is on the floor and the knee is pointing toward the ceiling. And feel the bottom of your foot and notice what toes are touching the floor and what toes don't really touch the floor, just barely touch the floor. And then gently start to press into that foot until you feel something on that hip. And then continue to press until that hip gets a little bit light away from the floor. And then relax the foot and bring the hip back down. Now, as you feel the bottom of your foot, sense if there's a place that you could put your foot, maybe closer to your bum, maybe farther away, maybe closer to your leg, maybe farther away, that would help you do this action of pressing the foot and lifting the hip. So you could try a couple different little locations until you find this spot that the mechanism, like a little lever between the ankle and the hip bone, connects. And then when you find the good spot for your foot to be for now, then go ahead and continue to press into the foot, feeling the hip peel, the back of the hip peel away from the floor, and then coming back down to the floor. And as you feel the back of the pelvis getting light on one side, notice how it gets heavy on the opposite side. So you're literally pressing into the foot in order to pour the weight from one side of the pelvis into the other side of the pelvis. So there's a rolling action of the pelvis to the side. And as that movement gets clearer, also feel how the weight shifts somewhere along the extended leg. Is there a rolling that you can feel all the way down the leg? And similarly, how far up can you sense this rolling of the pelvis? Maybe the low back gets light on one side. For some of you, it might be all the way up to the ribs. There's a shifting of the weight. And then leave that and slide your legs straight down on the floor for a moment. Feel the back of each side of your pelvis and the contact points of each leg. And then bend that same knee again and stand that same foot again. And lift that same arm up toward the ceiling again and hang the wrist. And now start to combine those actions. So this time, as you lift the shoulder blade away from the floor, also push into the foot and lift that side of your pelvis. And then bring the shoulder and the pelvis down. And check on your breathing. See if you started to hold your breath in order to focus, or if you chose to do the movement on an inhale, then perhaps try doing the movement on an exhale. So again, you can base your breathing on if there's actually support in the movement from the breathing. And as you continue exploring in this way, where can you reduce the effort? Is there an area around the buttocks or the low back, or maybe the neck or the face that you're using a little bit, and you could actually reduce that area more so that you could focus on just the rolling of the pelvis and the lifting of the shoulder. And once again, sense, where do you receive the weight on the opposite side? Okay, take a rest, bring the arm and the leg down. So this lesson does a few things. This practice does a few things. It helps you bring your attention to where you over effort, what your holding habits are. And generally, what you find in these lessons are echoed in your life. If you find, for myself, for example, I use my neck excessively for all of my actions, neck, traps area. So as I begin to find that in these Feldenkrais lessons, I start to be aware of it in my regular life. So if I'm reaching for something and I'm contracting in my neck, or if I'm talking to someone excitedly and I'm contracting in my neck, you can start to become aware of what your habits are. In addition, you start to learn about how the individual parts contribute to the whole, and how integrating, using more of our parts to execute an action can allow for the movements to be more easeful, more efficient, and more pleasurable. So bend the same knee again and reach the same arm up, and go back to the movement of lengthening the arm to the ceiling and rolling the pelvis, and also start to incorporate the skull. So keeping the back of the skull heavy, let the skull roll away from the arm. As the arm reaches up to the ceiling. And now check, what is it that you're doing? So on a simple level, do you start with the foot and then do the shoulder and then the head? Or do you start with the head? Is it possible you could do all the movements simultaneously? So whatever it is that you're doing, do something differently. Your nervous system can register a different option, two different options. And now as the movement starts to turn a little bit more into rolling, can you actually just let yourself enjoy that feeling? The weight shifting on the back ribs, the back of the skull, back of the pelvis, and this interesting feeling of effortlessly moving your body. Bring your arm down and your leg down. Take a rest. Again, start to listen to the way that your body's making contact with the floor now. If you're starting to sense a difference between the right and the left side. And if you are, then where exactly is it that you sense the difference? And in particular, feel your back ribs and the contact with that area. And then roll your head again a little bit and see if there's a change in the quality of that movement, or maybe it's a little bit easier on one side or the other side. And then test the original movement of just lifting the shoulder blade and the arm without the other parts of the body, and see if that movement overall is a little bit different than when you began. The range is improved, the ease is improved, or if your awareness of what you're doing has changed. And we are going to do the other side. A lot of times in these lessons, we actually do one side. And I've had people a lot recently actually come up to me after class and be like, why are we doing the other side? I'm walking with a limp. And the point is that we do one side so you can really contrast the difference, right? I won't torture you today. We'll even you out. But first, I want you to look at what's changed in different situations. So bring your arm down and move slowly. Come to your side and come to sitting. But as you do that, already see if you can do it without engaging your neck. Generally, when we come up to sitting, we initiate the movement with our neck, right? So what would it take for you sitting with minimal effort in the neck, hanging the head as long as you can, using the bigger muscle groups to press into your hips, use your arms, press into your hips, roll through the spine, and then once you come to sitting, you can pause there for a moment and sense what you feel in the right shoulder and the left shoulder as you're sitting, the right sitting bone, the left sitting bone. And then you'll come up to standing. And once you're standing, all the same stuff that we began with, which is first just stand and listen to yourself standing. Notice if you feel a difference on the right and the left side, right shoulder, right leg, left leg. Feel the way your feet are making contact with the floor. Breathing. And you can slowly turn around yourself. And then you can actually lift the arm that you've been working with up in front of you like you've been doing and reach a few times with that arm and see how that feels and what you do as you reach the arm forward. Not toward the ceiling, just reach it forward like you're really going to reach for something in life, right? And then compare that with the other arm. And then you can take a little walk around yourself, a little walk around. And feel the weight of your shoulders now, the swinging of the arms. Feel your neck and your head. And then come back to your place and lay on your back. And now the second side, we're going to expedite slightly because you've already begun the process of learning how to sense on the other side. However, we do still need to start at the beginning. Right? We can't just begin where we left off on the other side because we want to train the brain, the nervous system, piece by piece. So bring the other arm up and first sense how you do the movement of lifting the shoulder blade so the arm reaches toward the ceiling. And you might immediately realize that your attention goes to particular areas because of something you just learned. And you might notice something because of how you just trained yourself to notice things. And then keep the arm up in the comfortable place that it can sort of feel like it's suspended in space without effort. And start to press the shoulder blade. And start by pressing it arbitrarily, just pressing the plate of the bone until that gets clearer in your mind. the shape, the size of the bone. And when you feel like you've more or less mapped out the location and the size of the bone, then you can start pressing along the perimeter. And go slow. There's no rush. You need to take as much time as is necessary to stay connected to what you're feeling on this side. And then if you've got a pattern going in one direction, and reverse the direction. Check if there is a way that you could reduce the effort so that it's really just these tiny little points along the perimeter of the bone. And then bring your arm down, take a rest. And listen to the movement of your breathing. And roll the head gently to the left, to the right. And then leave that and bring the arm up. And a few times lift the shoulder blade. And then start to incorporate the movement of the head and get curious about at what point do you incorporate the head? Do you feel that the movement of the shoulder blade initiates the movement of the head? Or does the movement of the head initiate the movement of the shoulder blade? Is it possible to do the movements at the same time? And you can compare it again to rolling the head toward your arm. And in particular, as you're doing this, feel the front of your chest and the area around the collarbone. And then sense if the movement of the head actually does help you lengthen the arm more. And then bring the arm down. And then bend that same side knee and stand the foot. And feel how this foot makes contact with the floor. And already you can try a few different variations of where you have the foot placed to see if there's a place that the foot feels a little bit more clearly connected to the floor. And then when you find the happy place for your foot, then start to press into the foot to create that little lever to lift the hip. And you could try doing the lever a few times, and then you could try changing where the foot position is. And you can see for yourself that it actually makes a pretty interesting difference. Also, if the foot is turned in or the foot is turned out. Right? So you can really start to get an impression of how all of these nuances in our habits really affect how the whole system works, right? You know, if I walk with my foot slightly turned in, I might be impeding the ability for my pelvis to move, right? Or vice versa. You're just getting curious about all the different options that are available and what seems to be your normal. What's really exciting is when you discover that your normal isn't the same as what's the most comfortable. And if you practice giving your nervous system other options, well, your nervous system is going to opt for what's most comfortable. And that's when you start to retrain your system to function in a different way. Is it easier on this side to sense up the spine and up the ribs as you roll the hips? Are you noticing that your own ability to sense the nuances is getting a little bit sharper? Leave that. You can rest with the knee bent or straighten it out if you'd like to feel how the back of your pelvis settles. And continue to compare the left side and the right side. I mean, we did a lot of work on the first side, right? So how quickly does the other side catch up? And then bend the knee and lift the arm. And start to get curious about the system, how the lower body is actually supporting the upper body in the situation. So you can begin on your own and press the foot, lifting the arm toward the ceiling. You might notice that your head is already naturally shifting, and you can encourage that, rolling the head away from the arm. And then you can even start to play with rolling your weight more to the opposite side and really, yeah, exactly, really starting to get a sense of how far can you actually comfortably float away from the floor? Or how far do you end up rolling towards your side? And you can compare if you lift the shoulder and then press the foot, do you get as much range as if you press the foot as you're lifting the shoulder? And always checking on the breathing. You don't need to coordinate your movements with your breathing. You always just want to make sure that you're conscious that you're breathing. You could even try rolling your head the opposite way a few times. What do you do? And what's your limitation? What's stopping you from, let's say, lifting your right shoulder and your right hip a foot from the floor? Right? What is the limitation? Where do you get stopped? Just easy, good feeling, always reducing the effort. Retest, just lifting the shoulder blade and the arm and the second side. And sense if that has improved or changed its quality at all. And as you do it now, can you sense more of your whole self involved on a subtle level? Can you feel the weight shifting in your ribs as you're lifting your arm? Can you feel a subtle shift in the skull or in the pelvis? You might even feel there's a subtle shift in your legs just by lifting the shoulder. No other movement happening, just lifting the shoulder. And then bring that arm down and bend both of your knees. And again, lift that same arm up again. And this time, do a movement of lifting the shoulder up toward the ceiling and then drop it back down to the floor. Thud. Yep. And lift it up and drop it. So how high you lift it, again, it depends on you, but make sure that it's not a controlled fall. Even maybe you start small, lift it a millimeter and drop, but really lift it and then clunk, let it drop down. Lifting and dropping down. Yep. And again, try it a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter until it gets a little bit clearer. There's no holding or stuttering. Lifting it up and dropping it down. Thud. Lifting it up and dropping it down. Then check if you're still kind of controlling it a bit in your neck. Then just do a little less, a little less. It could be almost like a tremor. Yeah, like that small. Just like a little lift and drop, lift and drop. You can try it faster if that. Sometimes it's actually easier to do it faster. Lift and drop. Thunk, 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 thunk. Tap, 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 tap. And then again, make sure that you're not holding your breath as you practice that. Bring that arm down. Try it with the other arm. Bring the other arm up, and first a few times lifting and dropping it. And compare the difference here. Lifting and drop. Lift and effortless. Lift and drop. Yeah. And then if you get the sense of the lifting and dropping, then you could play with speeding it up and making it very, very, very small. So it's almost like a tremor. Dun, 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 dun. Lift, drop, lift, drop, lift, drop. Tap, 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 tap. Really heavy. Let it land heavy, heavy, heavy. Thud, thud, thud. And again, making sure that you don't feel any pressure around the neck or face anywhere else, right? Just what's easy. Okay. And then bring that arm down for a moment. And then go ahead and try it with two arms. Start slow, lift the arms up, and then thunk, let them come down. Nice and slow. As high as is comfortable to lift them so that you can completely drop them. Let gravity take over and drop. Drop. If it's useful, you can bend your elbows more. That helps you. You can change the angle of your arms. Try a few things that help you to get the feeling of lifting the shoulder blades, dropping them, and reduce the effort. And then do half as much and maybe do it twice as fast. So it's almost like little fluttering. You can make it very small. Still breathing. Belly is relaxed. Pelvis is relaxed. That's it. And do it slow a couple of times again. Lift and thunk. Lift and thunk. And then finally, lift both arms up. Hang both wrists. And again, make sure not to start accidentally using any effort. Just curious if you can now lengthen one arm toward the ceiling and press to that same foot and roll the head away from that arm and then come back down. And then the other side, lift the arm, press the foot, and come back down. And instead of making the movement bigger, can you actually make it smaller? And can you still maintain the lifting and dropping? Lift the right arm, the right hip, and then thunk, come back. Yeah, and then lift the left arm and the left hip, and then thunk, come back. And don't turn your head. Just listen to your head. Let your head sort of just follow what your shoulders are doing instead of moving your head deliberately. And as you shift from the right side reaching to the left side reaching, sense how the weight is shifting along your lower ribs and the area around your low back. And sense how it's moving around the axis of your spine. One side lifts and thunk, the other side lifts and thunk. And there's a subtle shifting of the spine. But the spine is the midpoint between these actions on each side. And then leave all that, bring your arms down, slide your legs down, and take a rest. And then gradually bend your knees and stand your feet. Roll over to your side. Get up gently, slowly. See how you feel standing and walking around. And see you next time. Thank you.